Alyse Parker. Welcome to the Thought Room. I am so excited to be doing this right now. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's going to be fun.
Technically, thank you for having me. We're here in San Diego, California, and I'm staying as a guest in your home. You picked me up from the airport a few days ago, and this is one thing I love about you already is the kind of human being you are. You're incredibly gracious, and we had actually only met once before you invited me out here to San Diego. It was actually at your birthday party, and you were like, "Yeah, come stay. We'll hang out. We'll drop in." And offered to pick me up from the airport. And on the car ride back from the airport, we just immediately dropped in, and you started telling me all these juicy things about your life story because you're so young. How old are you again?
27 years old.
You're 27 years old. You're a highly successful coach. You are a YouTube sensation. And that does not even begin to scratch the surface of who you are.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like when I hear like coach YouTube sensation, I'm like, that's a facet for sure. But over the last few years, I remember telling a friend, I was like, it feels like my career is like this little pocket of my life where it used to feel like everything.
Mm-hmm.
And my spiritual journey is my life.
Yes.
And there is that transition at some point.
Totally. And I think you hit the nail on the head as to what attracted me to you. Mm-hmm. Because there's something about you that stood out when I met you. I was like, this is not just another coach. Like the spiritual depth that is here is palpable. And in your kitchen at the birthday party, we just kind of dropped in and we started talking about all these overlapping areas. And I can't wait to get into some of them today. But rolling it back, can we start off with a little piece of, if you pretend that you never told me any of your life story that you told me in the car on the way back from the airport, would you give a tiny little taste, starting with the question of how on earth did you get into what you're doing now? And your coaching journey, your human journey, what led you to being so incredibly, gorgeously wise at 27 years old, highly successful, highly sought after? How on earth did this journey begin for you in your eyes?
Okay, so I'm going to start inching my way through the story. And at any point, feel free to stop me, reel me back in, or ask me to expand. So for me, I always felt a little bit out of place, which I feel a lot of people can relate to. But for me, I had my own little experience of what that felt like. And I remember like at holiday parties when I was younger, always connecting more with the adults in the room. And I always felt like this way shower, like very easily walking into new terrains of life and being so curious. Like my curiosity has led me here. And bringing it all the way back to when I first left the family nest. I grew up in Connecticut and I ended up transferring down to Georgia for some years of college. And the first year in school, I was kind of doing the normal college thing and realized, this is not working for me. I'm a sensitive being and I'm called to a more healthy route.
Tell me what you were studying again during that time.
During that time, I was studying secondary education. And then I don't know the order of this, but it was secondary education, art, and communications. Whoa, I just had a moment.
You did? What kind of moment?
I had a moment where I'm like, wow, I'm going to tear up. That's like the triad of what I'm moving into right now in some capacities.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
So, did that and then, moved down to this health and wellness focused college in Georgia. And I was still struggling a bit. That was where I actually hit what I consider my rock bottom. I was striving to be healthy, take care of myself, but I really found myself in a position where I was surrounded by people who were not really supporting me, toxic relationships. I was not treating my body well. My mind was filled with very self-deprecating thoughts. And I was dealing with an eating disorder, and I was not in a good place. And simultaneously, I would watch this YouTuber who was eating a raw vegan diet, and her whole lifestyle and her was so vibrant. And I was inspired. And so I was getting to the end of my rope and just continuously cycling in these patterns. And I remember that one night I went out drinking and binge eating, and the next morning I made myself throw up for the first time. And it was in that moment that doing something like that I hadn't done before, that was to the level of self-deprecation and self-hate that just kind of snapped me into this moment of a lot needs to change. I can keep going down this path and it's not going to look good, or I can start caring for myself and learning. And I want to feel like that childlike self that I remembered years and years ago that was happy and free. And so I did a 180 overhaul with my life. And I started meditating and journaling every single day and stopped spending time with certain people. I changed my diet and was spending time in nature, unfollowed all of these social accounts and started consuming more positive content. And I remember Googling, like, how do I be kind to myself? It was just like this moment of surrender and like, I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to learn and implement everything a lot.
Yeah.
And so within a matter of days and weeks, I just started feeling better and better. And I realized I want to document this journey. Like my life just turned around in a short period of time from rock bottom to feeling really good. And people in my school were starting to ask me, like, what are you doing? And there was this natural magnetism and curiosity from others. And so I started sharing on like every social media platform that existed. And then I went to this raw vegan fruit festival one summer. I was still in school, and I sat in on this workshop where there were some individuals sharing how they worked from home. They had YouTube channels, they were coaches, they hosted retreats, and they lived in Hawaii. And the fruit was falling from the trees, and I was like, I want that.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of struggling back and forth with, how do I make this my reality? Like, I'm in the matrix. How do I get this money to make this happen? How do I leave school when my parents are in one ear saying, this is the path for you, this is the only way? And it was about a year of going back and forth. And then the inner turmoil grew so strong. And I couldn't keep turning the other way. I had to do something. And I dropped out of school like 6 months before graduating. I sold all of my belongings. And I forgot part of the story. When I was at that festival, somebody told me that there was this fruit farm in Hawaii where you could work trade. And I didn't need money to make that happen. I could work in exchange for staying there. And so I went back literally immediately. I'm like, okay, selling everything. I remember that whole process.
Wow.
And I bought a one-way ticket to Hawaii.
Ballsy. How old were you?
I think I was 21.
Nice.
Yeah. And it was thrilling. And I remember having the conversation with my parents, and I was like, I'm doing this for myself. And they said they didn't support me. They were super disappointed.
Whoa, they said that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you mitigate their strong urging you not to go at that point?
So when I was at that fruit festival, there was another...
Which, first of all, just have to say, I love that this exists.
I know.
When you so casually just like it rolled off your tongue, you're like, yeah, I was at this raw vegan fruit festival. I was like, yes.
It was a alternative reality from the reality I'm living now.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Everything about raw vegan fruit festival sounds alternative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so. And so I was at this other workshop, and the person leading the workshop said, you don't need the approval of anyone in order to pursue your dreams. And that was a sentence that I needed.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, here I've been trying to compromise with my parents or have them understand that this is not for me and there's a different path for me.
Right.
And I really thought that I needed to be on the same page with them. And that sentence showed me that I didn't.
Gave you permission, essentially.
Gave me permission to hop on the call with them and to just be so certain. Like there was nothing that they could say or do that would sway me.
Right.
And yeah, I remember it being interesting and almost comical for me to witness their own process when I was sharing, yo, I'm out. And it was comical because it was like, I've already made this decision and I'm stoked. And so I made it to Hawaii. I was on this fruit farm for a couple of months. And then my parents sold my car back home. I moved into a van in Hawaii. And that was a whole van life adventure. And I was documenting everything, every step of the way.
So you were doing, so your parents sold your car so that you could have money to buy a van, right? Mm-hmm. And then you were doing van life.
Yeah.
So for anyone who doesn't know, I think most people probably have an idea, but what is van life? If anyone's not heard that term.
There's a spectrum of the quality of van life. There's like rugged, hippie, like also at the time I had dreadlocks in my hair.
I just cannot picture you.
I'll show you
dreadlocks.
a photo later.
Okay,
it's cute.
Awesome.
So that was the type of van life I lived.
Rugged van life.
Rugged. So it was a white van, no windows in the back.
It's the kind of van that your parents are like, don't take candy from that van.
Yes, I bought that van. I lived in the candy van. My van's name was actually named Happy.
That's even creepier.
And yeah, so the front two doors were broken. It was super rugged and it was an air mattress. And then I had my food stored in cardboard boxes. And so the other type of van life is like you got a shower, you've got
like
even
glamping.
Glamping. Yeah.
Okay.
So I did that. It was so fun. And I traveled around. It was an adventure. And I noticed that as I was living in Hawaii, my views on social media were starting to go up a lot. Like people were interested. What is this young girl doing? And I continued to share day in, day out. And I remember like waking up in the van, going to the coffee shop, dealing with like gnarly Wi-Fi, but being so committed to the process of uploading YouTube videos. And then a few months into that, I had some YouTube videos that went viral.
What was the first one that went viral?
Brushing out my dreadlocks.
Yeah.
And it was a 4-part series.
Wow, 4 parts.
4 parts because it took like a month or 2 to brush them out.
Wow.
I brushed out a few each day. I had 32 dreadlocks.
That had to look terrible, like in between parts 1, 2, 3,
well,
and 4.
Okay, so I would brush them out. It'd be super frizzy and then I would braid it.
Oh, okay.
So like I made it look cute, you know?
Okay.
And it took like 60 hours to brush them out.
Wow.
And I remember before sharing the videos, I looked on Google to see, or I looked on YouTube to see like, is this something I can do or do I have to shave my head? And nothing existed.
Casual. I like how casually you said it. Or do I have to shave my head? Like, just tell me what to do, Google.
Yeah. And there wasn't any information. I was like, well, let me see if this is an option.
Right.
And so as with everything, I documented it. And apparently there's millions of people all around the world who are curious about that too.
Wow.
And so I remember there was this website called Social Blade where you can see how many subscribers you have in each minute. And I was just watching like the screen flip so fast. And I was like, what's going on here? Did somebody give me a shout out?
Yeah.
What is going on here? And then my brother called me. He's like, hey, your video is on the homepage of YouTube.
Whoa.
And so overnight, I went from having 50,000 subscribers to 350,000.
Whoa.
And then I had 2 more videos go viral directly after. And so it just kept expanding. And over the years, I think it ended up being like 600 or 780,000 at the highest point.
Wow.
So here I was, this young woman, and living in Hawaii, and all of the journal entries, all of the visualizations of being financially free came true.
Like
And
almost overnight, right?
yeah,
In a way.
yeah.
I mean, you were putting in the hours, but it just kind of happened all
Mhm.
at once.
And I knew it was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen at that point in time.
How did you know?
Because when I got to Hawaii and I landed on the fruit farm, I only had like $500. And a lot of the individuals on the fruit farm were on food stamps. It was kind of encouraged. It was like, if you don't have this to make it work, like, here's a way to make this work for you. And I grew up in a middle-class family. So I kind of had this voice from my parents of like, don't do that, like, get a job. And I had a lot of jobs previously, but I really was believing in my social career. And I believed that it would take off. And I was like, I'm going to give myself 6 months on these food stamps. And I know that it's going to take off in that period of time. And I would speak it into existence every single day, like visually vocalizing it, writing it in journals. I was basically programming my mind with, this is my reality. And then it became my reality.
I love that we're having this conversation, and I shared with you a little bit about my story, but there was definitely a period of time that, I was on unemployment and I was qualifying for food stamps as well while I was building Lunar Wild. And I think there could be a lot of guilt and shame, right, around accepting help. I think that's pervasive in our culture as it is. But I love that you bring this piece of your story out to normalize it, because it's not like, oh, well, anyone listening might go, well, that was just lucky. That was like she won the luck lottery, and so did Hallie. And like there was a linear progression to this of the way that we started to make conscious decisions about where our boundaries were. Like, I won't get a second job and like pour all my energy and time into a second job and live under the illusion that that's the only way. Yes, it might be really tight and really uncomfortable for a bit, but I'm going to be my own boss and I'm not going to let go of that vision. And that is a really, really critical step. And then the next piece is what you said about you were programming yourself every day. And I think that cannot be underscored enough for anybody who is following a dream that thinks this can't be there for them. I just want to reiterate everything that you said and echo it tenfold, because that is the not so secretive secret to success.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for amplifying that. I agree. Like, oh my gosh, if I was to say, I need to take this job right now, like, I can't accept that support because my parents look down on it, or like some portions of society look down on it. And if I wasn't actively believing in myself, and whenever I'd catch a thought that was in scarcity, or this isn't going to work, or it's going to take too long, or it's not going to happen, whenever I would catch that, I would say 3 times the opposing belief.
Yes. Like, I want to punctuate that. That is so, so important. So it's like applying almost this, not even equal and opposite force, but like profoundly more strengthened force to whatever the I don't want to call it a negative thought, but an unhelpful thought.
Yeah.
I used to have a sign on my desk that said very simply, how do you want to feel? And what that represented for me is, if I would catch myself in a thought throughout the day that I didn't want to be, like, it felt dense or heavy or unhelpful, I would stop and I would see that sign that would be like, well, how do you want to feel then? And I would pause, I would take a breath, I'd close my eyes, and I would say things like, I want to feel free. I want to feel abundant. I want to feel ease and flow. If I was feeling frustrated, I'd try not to focus on the frustration or focus on the scarcity, and do exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. So amazing.
Yeah. It is the not so secret. It's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. So then from there, you moved out of the van.
I moved out of the van. I was still living in Hawaii for some time. Now that there was such a beautiful, large community tuning in, I got excited about creating offerings. And so started off with apparel, and I was sharing monthly newsletters, like updates in my life. And I created a self-love ebook. I created a positive affirmation coloring book. And every step of the way I was sharing. I was like, I'm learning this new program InDesign for designing the ebook, or I'm researching different companies to create the coloring book, and like showing every step of the way. And I started hosting retreats in Hawaii. And that was where I started to kind of shift into a little bit of a different archetype, where I noticed that, okay, I'm here in this guide position where for a long period of time, I almost felt like others were living vicariously through me. I remember receiving comments on videos of, I wish I could do this, but I never could because of this, or you're lucky because of that, or I wish I could live a life like this. And I was also receiving questions of, how did you do this? And so I was kind of just observing the comments that were coming through. And I was like, okay, there's a lot of individuals who are entertained by this. And there's a lot of individuals who really want the how-to. Like, what are those things that you've been doing behind the scenes that brought this into fruition at the age you're at? And so the retreats were kind of the first step into starting to facilitate group discussion and journaling prompts to support other young women in gaining clarity on what they really want. That's separate from what the world wants for them. Yeah.
And you had an interesting piece about, I so related to when you were talking about getting your first house in Hawaii and being like, okay, I'm stretching my budget, but I really want this. I deserve this. And I believe in leveling up. Like, I think that, am I paraphrasing this correctly? So it was kind of like this idea of, okay, this is the top of my budget, but it's going to motivate me to keep leveling up so that it's effortless to pay this amount of rent. But then you actually had some challenge around living in that house. Are you willing to share about what happened with that part of your journey?
Yeah, I am. I'm going to backtrack a tiny bit, because what had happened was I hiked half of the Appalachian Trail. After spending a couple years in Hawaii, I took a little segue and went to the East Coast, hiked for a bit. And then at the end of that hike, I was very intentional with integrating back into what I consider the matrix and life, society off of the trail, out of the woods. And so I was journaling and gaining so much clarity on what I wanted for the next home. And I wrote out in detail in the present tense, like, I am so grateful to wake up to this home right beside the ocean. I can see 2 palm trees and the sun. I can hear the ocean waves. I can smell the ocean. And this is a 3-bedroom home. I have my office in here, and there's one room that's painted blue and one room that's painted pink. And I had this whole vision of, like, here's exactly what it looks like and feels like. And I'm so grateful that this is my reality now. And this home came into existence. And it was on the higher end of my budget, or out of my budget. And like you just shared, I did stretch myself. And
did it actually have like a pink room and a blue room?
So it was unfurnished, and there were 2 rooms that were not painted at all. It was drywall, and I got to paint them.
Wow.
I know. It was unreal.
Yeah.
And yeah. So yes, I was very much like, okay, I am going to expand here 100%, and this is going to support me in this. And that wasn't like, I didn't carry these thoughts of like, oh, I'm nervous, I'm not going to be able to make it happen. I just kept sharing to myself, I've got this. Like, the income is coming. I'm creating these things. I'm attracting the abundance, and this is my new reality, and just leveling up in that way. And so I moved into this home. It was dreamy. the most beautiful home ever right over the ocean. And then the winter season came and it was rainy for like 7 months straight. And the home developed toxic mold and I was getting super sick and I didn't know what it was when I was in it. And
what does sick look like with mold?
Sick with mold looks different for different people. For me, it looked like such severe sinus congestion and head pressure that pretty much like my cheeks all the way up to the top of my head, my entire face, it kind of felt like I was wearing like a mask that was just like full of pressure.
Yeah, like fluid, inflammation in the face, brain fog.
Yeah, could never breathe through my nose for like day in, day out. And migraine headaches, like sometimes my eyes were sensitive to light. And I had no appetite for months. And so I was under eating because of that. And because I was so congested, I remember like doing push-ups and squats and jumping jacks in the middle of the day so that I could clear out my sinuses for like 5 minutes to film a video. And then halfway through the video, I'd pause and get my heart rate up again so that I could breathe and not sound like I'm totally like this right now.
Wow.
And I didn't realize like how sick I was when I was doing that. I didn't have the cognitive capacity to expand out and be like, you shouldn't need to be doing this right now.
Right.
To be able to breathe.
Right.
And then I also started struggling with memory loss and felt like I was a walking zombie. And towards the end of it, the symptom that like really got me to notice that I was stuck in something not so great was I was losing my ability to communicate. Like I wasn't able to recall certain things. I wasn't able to speak like myself and understand what other people were saying. Like I was just in this fog.
Terrifying.
It was rough.
Scary. And one thing that you said about this that was the most terrifying to me, and I relate to this because of Lyme's disease and the level of inflammation with that and the brain fog. It's like sounds like you got to this level where the brain fog and the lack of ability to articulate yourself or problem solve got so extreme that you didn't even know how to think your way into a solution. Because you were just like zombified and numb.
And on top of it, besides the congestion, from the outside looking in, nobody really knew how in it I was or how out of it I was.
Yeah.
Like my best friend, my mom, people that I care about, they just noticed like I wasn't responding to them. And I didn't have the capacity to like maintain relationships. And people could kind of tell I was withdrawing, but they didn't know I was like losing myself and my brain. And so I took a trip to, at the time, what I called the mainland to visit a friend. And I felt a little bit better. And then I went back to Hawaii and felt so much worse as soon as I walked in the door. And that's when I realized it was my home.
That's not a good feeling.
It wasn't a good feeling because it was this dream home that I literally manifested.
Yeah.
It was like everything. And it was killing me slowly.
Yeah.
And so I decided, well, all of my friends in Hawaii have some level of mold in their homes. I have to leave Hawaii. And that was another like really rough point for me because in my like young self mind, I was like, I created my dream life. Like I'm living in a place that most people vacation. I manifested this dream home. I've leveled up. Like I love my job. I love my life, but I am really struggling. And I had to leave it all. And so I was like, where's the driest place that's landlocked? And I picked a random apartment, moved to Colorado, healed for like 8 months.
What did that entail?
That entailed lots of supplements, working with a naturopath and some other doctors, and going on a very restrictive diet. At the time, I was vegan, raw vegan. And so I cut out a lot of foods. And so I was basically in this like 1 or 2 year long restrictive diet because of the loss of appetite and then the healing protocol. And I've started to feel way better being out of the mold.
Yeah.
And I still didn't feel like my spark was online. I still was like, something's not right here in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember expanding beyond me and my own experience and like looking at the messages that I was receiving of like, this video is so inspiring. You've supported me with like getting out of this abusive relationship or changing my life around. And I just had this message come through of like, you need to function full force for yourself and for the collective.
Mm.
And that's when I made a decision that changed a lot for my life.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. I had a few friends who were transitioning from vegan to carnivore, eating all plants to all animals.
That's
And
drastic.
it was drastic. And they were all feeling better, healing all of these different unique ailments and struggles that they had, physical, mental, or physical, cognitive. And I was just at that point where I just kept getting this message every single day, like, you have to do this for the collective and for you. Like, you deserve to feel better, but like, you have an important role to play and you need your spark.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
So I ate salmon one night and I woke up the next day and my brain was online.
Like a lot of salmon, right?
I ate a lot of salmon.
Like that was the whole meal, just like a giant plate of salmon.
Yeah.
After not eating any meat for
4.5 years.
Yeah. Were you sick? Were you just like, oh,
No.
this is gross?
No.
Or?
So that's a question that I got asked a lot was like, when you went from vegan to carnivore, did you get sick? No. I just started feeling like a superhuman.
Right.
Wow. I was very deficient.
Right.
So then I was carnivore for a year.
Yeah.
And
like very strictly carnivore?
Like
or?
90%.
So for anyone listening who isn't familiar with the carnivore diet, my question's twofold. One, can you explain in your own words what it is? And two, is there a resource out there currently if anybody wants to explore it? What would be your top recommendation?
Yeah, good question. So for me, the way that I was following the carnivore diet was eating meat, fish, eggs as the primary foods I was consuming. And then I'd have like a little chocolate and blueberries and crackers. But for the full year, I was really like primarily carnivore. For resources, I became friends with this man named Paul Saladino, and he's a medical doctor and has been carnivore for years. And he is, to this day, like when I look at him, when I speak to him, the healthiest person that I know.
Wow.
So he wrote a book. It's very scientific, but he has amazing resources on all social platforms.
Shout out to Paul.
Shout out, Paul.
Paul, let's try to get you on the show, man.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk carnivore.
He would be a fun guest.
Sweet. Cool. Okay, so from there, you ate the salmon, brain comes online, you're feeling like a superhuman. Then what?
I was having a hard time with the fact that I was right back into an extreme diet. And I was like, I don't want to be all the way on the other side of the spectrum. Like, I want to eat balanced. And my body was guiding me. And it was asking for those foods every single day. And so I was listening. And about a year in, I was finally feeling called to eat other foods. And so a couple of months into shifting my diet, I was finally ready to share publicly because it was clear, like, okay, I'm clearly sticking to this way of eating. I was kind of going through my own process, like, is this going to be for real?
Right.
Or is this just for like a little bit?
Right.
And looking back, like I was a little bit naive and unaware of the amount of, what's the proper word? Like loyalty, but also judgment within the vegan community.
Ask that. Like, did you piss people off from
I
going
had no
from
idea what was coming
vegan
my
to
way.
carnivore? Because to be clear, it sounds like, I don't want to assume, but it sounds like you were vegan for raw vegan for the health benefits of it more so than the morality piece. Like that was what initiated your decision to be raw vegan. And so it sounds like you were getting some backlash from vegans when you switched to carnivore, understandably. But how did you like navigate that sticky situation?
Well, it started with one video titled "I'm Not Vegan Anymore."
Whew. Did that get a lot of views?
It got a lot of views.
Yeah.
I was among the top 3 vegan influencers.
Wow.
During that time period.
Wow. So in a way, you probably didn't know it at the time, but you were kind of destroying a piece of your audience, maybe. I don't know.
Yes, I didn't know it at the time.
Right.
And looking back, my thought on it is, it's beautiful that I inspired people to follow that way of eating and that has benefited them. And there have been a lot of people who are like, I'm still vegan, I'm vegan for life. And it's so sad and hard for me. And I don't like the fact that you're not. And what I say to those individuals is like, this is amazing. This is like beautiful that I played a role in that it's working for you, that you're loving it. And it's okay that my path is different. That doesn't have to mean anything for you.
Right.
But it does.
Right.
And so that was maybe 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point on, I have been seeing videos be made about me, criticizing me and hating me every single week.
Every single week for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Like, how does that feel? Because pragmatically, I'm sure that any individual listening does not want that experience as a part of their life. Like having people make videos criticizing you weekly sounds like most people's nightmare.
Yeah.
And so how on earth have you been able to deal with that?
Yeah. It definitely, there have been moments where I'm like, this is a nightmare. And there have definitely been moments where I'm like, this is the biggest blessing. So the first year or so was super traumatic. And I didn't really have any level of support system other than friends and family who, bless their heart, but they didn't have any idea what it was like to be in that position. And it suppressed this creative, like free spirited, like I'm going to share everything part of me. And that went dormant for a while.
That's so sad.
It was sad. It was like, I'm still sharing. I'm still showing up every week.
Yeah.
But like, there's a part of me that's like super sad and closed off. And people noticed. And they would make comments of like, you don't seem like yourself. And here I am just like still trying to keep the show going on.
Right.
And yeah, that went on for a while. And then there was kind of like a new chapter, which I don't think that you know about.
Ooh, tell me more.
So about a year after navigating that, still showing up, I sat in my first ayahuasca ceremony.
I love where this is going.
And this all ties into like what I'm doing now, who I am now. You're probably like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
And I remember this was, so this was at a season where I was like, show me what's blocking me. Because here I was back in this position of like, I know a part of me is dormant. I know I'm not accessing everything that's within me. And so that was my intention.
That is such a powerful intention. Don't ask that, and don't set that intention unless you really want to get the answer. Because I have also set that intention, and I was like, this will be fun. Like, show me what's getting in the way of my big work. And it's like, it will show you what parts of your personality what you've constructed, what you're doing to yourself, how you're speaking to yourself, how you're treating others, that is getting in the way of you living your greatest dharma. And that's an ugly thing to face, in my opinion, but worth it. So let's hear about what your experience of asking that, setting that intention, show me what's blocking me was.
Yeah. So I was thinking like, oh, maybe there's like mold in my house again, or maybe like I haven't been working on my mindset practices.
Uh-huh.
My entire first experience sitting with grandmother was remembering being sexually abused as a child.
Whoa.
And that's what came of my intention.
Fuck.
And I was so confused because I was always that person in the group of friends that was like, I remember my childhood was like rainbows and sunshines. I don't remember like a ton, but what I do, like I was outside, the grass was green, I was playing with bumblebees and inchworms. And then that came through and it was like reliving it visually. And I was so confused and I had no integration afterwards.
Mm. Are you willing to share whatever details feel comfortable about the context around that situation and whether it sounds like you'd blotted it out of your memory completely. Did you question yourself after? Were you like, did this actually really happen?
Yeah.
Tell me more about like the nitty-gritty of actually the emotional experience of having to relive the imagery of that, what that felt like during ceremony, and any details you're willing to share.
Yeah. So what I remember was it was very visual for me. So every time my eyes were closed, every time the music was playing, I was in a different location witnessing it happen.
How old were you?
There was a spectrum from like little baby into my teens.
And you didn't remember this?
No. And so I'll bring this all together. We're going to like move slowly through it and you'll see how all the pieces connect. It's fucking wild.
Oh, I'm hanging on a cliff, Alyse. This is wild. Okay,
so there
I'm
were
here.
like 4 or 5 different scenes throughout the full experience where I'd close my eyes and be in the visual experience witnessing. And then I would need to take a breather for a second. And I'd open my eyes and I would feel I'd be back in the room. And so that was my anchor of like, I can allow myself to see and remember as much as I want.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt so safe in that, which I wasn't aware was possible in sitting with ayahuasca. I thought I'd be fully taken over and have no control. And I felt like I was really being shown like I am safe. And I was, as much as what was coming through was a lot, I felt like the medicine was being gentle with me. And so, yeah, just these snapshots and visuals of each experience. Afterwards, I did question. I was like, what the fuck did I just see? And is this real? And I started to learn like that a lot of people have these memories come back when they're in ceremony, and I also was doubting. So it was like on and off every day. I was just like in treacherous pain and sadness and grief of this childhood that I thought I had,
right?
But then also questioning my sanity.
Right. Ouch. Yeah.
And I confronted the person who was involved, and they said no.
This was a person, it was the same person in all of the different situations. And it was somebody close.
And they said no. And I said, my inner knowing and my physical experience was telling me otherwise.
What did that conversation look like?
It looked like, hey, I remembered this. And it looked like an explosion of anger and deflection.
Wow.
And screaming and hanging up.
Wow.
And so a few months after remembering having that conversation, I started to have gnarly headaches, like migraines every single day. And I got to this point where I hired an assistant to help me do my laundry and take out the trash and water my plants because all of a sudden I was having these debilitating symptoms.
Wow.
And I was like, is this mold? Like that was kind of just like my radar of like whenever there was some symptoms, I'm like, is this coming back? And I was doing hyperbaric chamber and oxygen and testing out different diets and like turning off my Wi-Fi at night. I was trying to do all the things. And I was all of a sudden like struggling to work again.
Yeah.
And so at this point, I had moved to San Diego. And I had a friend who introduced me to this energy worker. She was like, hey, I was struggling with UTIs the past few years and I was working with this guy and he helped me see that it was related to my emotions and helped me clear it. And I said, related to your emotions?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is where the journey kind of changes a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, emotions. Oh, I'm not connected to that very much. And yet there's this experience that I had recently and you know, I've cried and I've felt things, but like I'm definitely not connected to my emotions.
Right.
And so my first session with this energy worker, I felt something that I'd never felt in my life, which was actually my energy field. And it was so foreign and mystical to me. Mm. And the curious critter in me was like, I need to know more about this. But in a very sacred way. I was like, this is important. This is something that a lot of people don't know about. And I'm experiencing something that's really important. And I'm going to pursue this. And so I started seeing this energy worker regularly and learning about how I have had a very unhealthy relationship with anger and sadness. And the amount that I have suppressed, and I learned about my survival patterns and the ways that I've been operating, and my whole life was being turned around. And as I started to feel more and give myself permission to feel safe in my body and express emotions, one little step at a time, my symptoms went away.
Yes. Yes.
And so that's when things changed from physical health and mindset is everything. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started to notice that my state of being energetically and emotionally is this whole new world that is really important. And I started exploring that every single week in session and reading books and practicing, dropping into my body, out of my mind, establishing safety. And it's been a beautiful unraveling.
You just said the phrase out of your mind. This morning, I was walking around your neighborhood, listening to an Alan Watts Audible compilation called Out of Your Mind. And he speaks about how when emotions are not processed, they're stored in the body, right? And we know this because we work in this space, but I love the way he articulated it. And he talked about, being a child. Like when you're a child, you're just this raw ball of emotion, right? And then adults come in and they try to like button you up in all these ways. And there's like shame or like the things that happen or things that adults say where it's like, come on, pull it together. And Alan Watts talks about, well, we don't know how to pull it together like emotionally when we're a child. So what actually happens is we pull it together like in a muscular way. So it's like, the anal retentive, like the squeezing of all the perineum and the facial muscles in the jaw get tight. And then that creates a cascade of like neck tension and shoulder tension. And so when explained and unpacked in that way, it makes perfect sense how anything physical happening in the body has an emotional component, hands down. Hands down. Because if everything in the body is interconnected, then all the parts are talking to each other. And I think that's what's so broken about the standard medical model is like looking at things as like individual organs or like, oh, this joint, like let's do a knee surgery and pretend that's not going to affect every other single thing going on in the body, like the hips and the feet. And because it's all about alignment. So I'm so grateful for you bringing this point forward because I really think it needs to be said. So for anyone out there wanting to explore, here's a question coming, wanting to explore the connection to their physical experience with what may be hidden in the emotional body, what have been some of your favorite resources to explore that?
Ooh, hands down, the 5 Personality Patterns book.
Mm-hmm.
That book explores the ways that we start taking on survival patterns when we're young and there's an unmet need, and the way that we survive in that moment. And if it works, we keep repeating that into the rest of our life.
What was your primary survival pattern that you discovered when you went into that book?
There is 2. So the first one was the leaving pattern, which is kind of in the realm of dissociating, like up and out of your body into this mystical world. And which makes sense as to why I remember my childhood being this fantasy and why I often see the world through rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
Is, okay, I'm up and out to protect myself out of the body so I don't have to feel the terror or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The other was the rigid pattern.
Right.
And there's gifts and distortions of each pattern. So there's ways that it shows up when we're in the pattern. And then there are gifts that we can access from starting with that survival pattern and being able to expand beyond it, but keep the gifts. And so the rigid is all about the rules. A lot of us in the Western society kind of are operating in the distortion of the rigid, which is like, I have to play by the rules. I am my performance. And if you're not following the rules, you're wrong. And I'm going to judge you. If I'm not doing it properly, I'm going to judge myself. And the gifts are like this crystalline organization, being able to connect all the dots. And it's interesting to be able to look at the maps in that book and to see when I'm in pattern, when I'm in distortion, and when I'm accessing the gifts.
I love that. Such a great reminder that, you hear that saying, our gifts are a curse, but like, I really, well, that's such a negative way of saying it, but truly, like finding that deeper self-love for all those quirky little nuances about ourselves, and it's like, if there's something that's feeling tight in our lives, the invitation is to reflect with oneself, how am I creating this distortion of a particular gift that I have right now? Because that's what it is. I'm maybe holding on a little too tightly, pushing a little too hard, stretching or moving or attaching in a way that's actually keeping me from expressing this thing that is actually my ultimate gift. So I bet that people listening know exactly the thing that is feeling like the most giant roadblock, whether it's their perceived emotionality, they can't keep it together, they feel like they're too much, right? Like these sorts of things, or hyper controlling or unable to delegate tasks or what have you. First and foremost, just to get in touch with compassion and like laugh at the human experience of how how tight we get about things. And maybe this warrants a journal reflection of like, what is challenging me the most right now? What's feeling tight? What's feeling like it's not working? And what is the hidden gift just waiting in the wings, ready to be expressed out of this?
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to close the loop on what ended up being the healing in your sexual journey piece, that piece.
Yeah. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, just like, okay, so you call this person. You said this thing happened. I think. Did this happen? They exploded at you. They hung up the phone. Have you had any contact since or any sort of resolution from them? And if not, how have you been able to move through that on your own?
Yeah. Okay. So there has been some contact, but no resolution when it comes to that. Where I stand on my own resolution or my view on all of it is it doesn't matter if it happened or it didn't. Genuinely, I was struggling back and forth for a while. Like, I need to know this way, that way.
Right.
And where I'm at right now and where I've been for some time is it literally doesn't matter because that experience was what connected me to energy work and being able to connect with myself and be gentle with myself and compassionate and understand these maps of who I am and what I'm here to do, what we're all here to do, what's happening on the planet right now. And has connected me with all of these different people and all of these different synchronicities. And my life has been magic and connected to like what I'm here to do and put me on that path from that experience.
Okay, that is some serious flow. And that event for some people, they may never be able to get past having a vision like that, feeling a thing happened and not getting the resolution. So, what's the special sauce for trusting that deeply, that everything is interconnected and everything is leading us somewhere that we're meant to go?
Two things. One is, well, I guess this is kind of two things wrapped in one. Noticing the blessings that have come from hardships. Noticing the magic of how this rough thing that happened in the past for me, for anyone, has maybe led to, I can't take it anymore. I'm going to seek help. Or I'm going to go to this motivational workshop. Or I'm going to reach out to this friend. And then this friend is going to connect me with this person. Or I'm going to enroll in this program. Or I'm going to go back to school. Or I'm going to do this. And then all of the dots that connect to where you are now and how much you've learned and grown from that.
Turning our breaking points into blessings.
Yeah.
I just got the insight for an amazing, what could be a journal prompt coming out of this is like putting like 2 columns. So putting a line down the page and taking all of the breaking points or hard things that happened in our life. And then on the other side, listing the blessings that came out of it, especially for somebody who's maybe struggling in depression or struggling with a story that life just isn't working out for them. This could be a challenging activity, but to really just not let yourself get away with not finding a blessing because this is the mental rep. Like it is a choice whether or not to stay in our melodrama and insist that nothing good came out of it, because something good always comes out of it when we search for it. And the more we choose to entrain our minds, to direct our minds toward what is a gift, what is a blessing, the more we perpetuate that sort of energy coming into our lives. Do you agree?
Yes, 100%. And sometimes, like you said, it's really tough in the moment when you're in it. Sometimes it's looking back where you can see, oh, I met that person and I landed here on this specific day so that I could get this experience that has put me on this new path. And when you're in the moment and it feels tough and you genuinely can't see what the freaking blessing is, it's a choice to say, I trust that I will see what the blessing is in the future.
Yes. Yes. That's beautiful. I went through a really rough time during lockdown and I was feeling really down, really depressed. The only thing that I was doing was recording this podcast from like a tiny little room. It's so funny to reflect back on that. But one thing I decided to do one day was pull out my notebook and write down the most horrible things that had occurred in my life on one side of the page. And just like let myself feel that and like let myself grieve. Like, yeah, that happened. That's heavy, man. That's holy shit. But then on the other side, I was like, things I motherfucking did anyway. And I really sat and intentionally was like putting a resume down of every, cool thing that I did against all odds. And to sit and look at it in such a structured way where it's all laid out in front of you, it was profoundly impacting for me. And it just sort of gave me a renewed sense of hope. So I think the more that we can like gamify our own self-motivation and mindset, it's super helpful.
Yes, to everything you just said. For anyone who is in a mega rut, making a list of your accomplishments, not just doing things you've done, but like a shift in your way of being.
Ooh, like list some of yours.
So an example would be like, I hosted this retreat in Hawaii, or I earned this much money in 1 month, or I made progress with attuning to my needs, recognizing what my needs are, communicating them.
Yeah.
I made progress with breathing and bringing my awareness into my body. So it doesn't have to be like, oh, these performance-based things, all that, but like creating some balance of accomplishments and ways that you've grown essentially in different areas of life.
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking about this, and even one for me that I was reflecting to you all this morning was how I feel proud of how I've shifted my social group, in the last 5 years. And just like joking about the fact that last night, there was a birthday party and we were all drinking canned water. And it's like, every once in a while, like I might have a drink. It's just not really part of my life. I've had like a couple in a couple of years, but I'd have no judgment of people that do. But I just was like, this is so cool because alcohol, when it was a prominent part of my life, was used to escape the feelings that were in my body. And it was like, well, I need a drink to let loose, or like everything in New York's like, let's meet for a coffee or let's meet for a drink. And so it was like just a social thing. And to now just be so deeply comfortable dropping in an intimacy and deep conversation, and we're drinking water, man. We're like, I love that. And so that was part of my gratitudes last night. And something like that could absolutely be something that goes on a list like that, like how you're shifting in your relationships or the choices that you're making too.
Yeah, I think the reality is we're all on this inevitable path of growth and expansion, and there's no going backwards. As much as we can go through a season of, I feel like I'm in a rut, quote unquote, again, there has still been progress made. You have still evolved and expanded into a new version of yourself. And so how can we look back on all of those little things and actually notice the direction that we're headed? Because that creates momentum.
Yeah, for sure. Amazing. I love all this. I want to switch gears a little bit, and I would love to ask you about conscious relationships, your relationship. And this morning, a little bit, we were talking about sharing publicly about our relationships. I've stepped into doing this with my new partnership with my partner, Judd. It was very scary for me to talk about that publicly for the first time. And I'll tell you why. The fear was, if I share about this, and I'm so excited about it right now, but if I share about this and we break up, I'm going to be embarrassed. And I'm also accountable to this audience that I love. Like, I love you guys so much listening. You are a part of my heart. And I would feel out of integrity not sharing about a big change like that in my life. And yet I'm fearful that I don't have, this was the story anyway. I was fearful that I didn't have the tools to go through an experience like that emotionally and still have the fortitude to share about it. So you can see how my mind was thinking like 20 steps ahead because like my relationship's not ending. None of that's happening. That's
driving.
all fear-based, right? And I think that, you know, parts of that resonated with you in your story.
Yeah. Ooh, I love talking about love.
Yes, me too.
I'm like, oh, I love it. Okay. Yeah. Conscious relationships. So within the realm of energetics work that I've been doing, been learning so much about connecting with my needs, expressing my needs. And for me, being in an intimate relationship has always been one of the biggest teachers. And so I found myself pretty back to back in intimate relationships. And I learn a lot about what parts of myself and which ways I like stay true to myself in relationships and in which ways I merge. And I've learned so much. So right now I'm in a committed relationship with someone named Luke. And I met him at Burning Man about 1.5 years ago. And
I love Luke, by the way. He's great. He helped us set up.
Thanks,
Luke.
up. Yeah. He loves being of service and supporting. He's a sweetheart. And this is the first relationship for me, which I feel like we've been talking about recently. First relationship for me where I am not the dominant leader, masculine, caregiver, provider force in the relationship. So I've been in a handful of long-term relationships and I was always the one running the show. Like, this is my reality and you're kind of in it and I've got you. And as a result, I wasn't able to quite sink into my feminine. And so that's been very new for me in this relationship. And something that Luke so gracefully supports me with. Here he comes. He walks in to check on the camera.
Thanks, Luke.
In the beginning of our relationship, like, I remember there would be little things where I would independently carry some groceries inside or like try and open the door when I had like my hands completely full. And here he was ready to support. And I noticed the pattern within myself of like, nope, I've got this. Because that's the way I had been operating. And so there's been a lot of learning on how to relax into being cared for and kept safe and provided.
I love this. Like, receiving is a difficult thing. And you're making me think of a story when my nephew's mother, her name's Juliana, when she first had my nephew Gio, it was very much that. It was like, she's this like strong Colombian woman and she's just independent and has learned that and has really like carved a life for herself. But I remember one day we were having a picnic and Gio was just like really young, like, I don't know, 6 months old maybe. And we were walking with our other friend Kyle into the park, and Juli's carrying the picnic basket, all these blankets, all these bags, and the baby carrier. And Kyle was kind of like, oh, let me take something. And she was like, no. And I turned to her and I was like, let the man take something. You know, I was like, girl, yes, say yes. Like, we say yes to the service of the divine masculine stepping in to offer themselves. And what I feel about that is when somebody is genuinely offering their service and we turn them down, we're actually refusing a gift. So it's like if I wrapped you up a little birthday present and I said, here, Alyse, and you said, oh, no, I'm good. right? If you reframe it that way, that's rude, right? And so the fear is we don't want to receive the gift because we don't want to seem selfish.
Yeah.
But in being honest and agreeing to receive the gift, you're actually being a beautifully clear mirror for that individual. If they were giving disingenuously, like, here, let me pay for this lunch bill, right? And you're like, great, thank you so much. That's so kind of you. And they were like, well, shit, I thought you were going to fight me on that a little more, right?
Yeah.
That's their learning. And then they get the opportunity to reflect on, am I overgiving? Where are my boundaries? Beautiful. So we can't do the thinking for people. We just have to really align with what feels good for us. And if someone's offering to give to you, receive.
Yeah.
With love.
It also comes into like the flow of energy, allowing myself to receive that giving, loving, caring energy.
Right.
Versus cutting it off, saying, nope, I got it.
Right.
And so that's been a big learning in relationship and also life in general. Like, oh, somebody asks if, like an Uber driver asks, can I carry your suitcase? And I'm like, no, I got it every single time. I just started to become aware of all of these different areas of my life. And that's just one pattern. But really, like, in this beautiful journey that I've been on, just becoming more aware of what is my personality, what are my patterns, and what is my soul essence? And what are all these like little things that have developed and like solidified over the years that I can start bringing awareness to? And then here's a big thing in conscious relationship is also bringing this into conversation with my partner. So, hey, I notice, and I've learned so many little tools along the way. There's something called the retire the role conversation, which I learned from a healing retreat. Hey, I noticed that I've been showing up in this role where I've been playing small, I've been listening a lot and not speaking as much. And I'm curious how, if you've noticed this, how this makes you feel. And so they share, oh, yeah, I have noticed actually, or no, I haven't noticed. And here's how this makes me feel. And then I share, I'm committed to retiring this role. And here's what I want to step into. I want to be more expressive. I want there to be more balance and listening and sharing. And here's what I would love. Are you willing to support me in that? And how does that make you feel? And they're like, yes, that's all I want for you. I want you to be in your full essence. And like, yes, I'll support you. And then I get to share, okay, cool. Like, here's one idea. I would love for you to support me in this way. Are you open to that? Yes, I'm open to that. I'd love to do that for you. And then I share, okay, are there any other ways that you would like to support? Any ways that you're inspired? And it just becomes this beautiful ongoing dialogue with all these different patterns that I notice in myself.
I love that. Retire the role, and what intimacy that builds, just having those conversations and being honest. And wow, I absolutely, absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing that tool. That reminds me of a little tiny book that I love that one of my dear friends, Kayla, gave me. It's called Beginning Anew, and it's kind of like a little Buddhist book, and it's got two little like love birdies on the front. And there's one question in there talks about watering each other's flowers. So this metaphor of like watering your flowers. Have you been watering your partner's flowers? And you can ask the question, how can I water your flowers today? And the other question being, are there any ways in which I've unconsciously hurt you lately? Like, whoa, okay. Inviting that in. Yeah. What do you have on that?
Well, this is just like, bing, this is so important because something I've been exploring in relationship recently is stacked resentments and how that creates this dull feeling within partnership. And that's essentially what brings a lot of people apart over the years is like stacked resentments of not sharing these little things.
Right.
Versus, yes, has there been anything that has added up for you lately? Or one of my energy workers calls it withholdings. Do you have any withholdings to share?
Yes.
Is it a small withholding, a medium, or a big withholding?
Right.
And then we get to see, okay, how much space do I have to hold if this is a big withholding that my partner has? But this is so important, not just in intimate relationships, but all relationships, friendships. Like, hey, is there anything that you've been holding on to recently? It doesn't even have to be sparked by anything. That's a key too, is like, oh my gosh, this is big too. I have a friend who has these roommate check-ins, and he's like, we clean our home on a regular basis. We clean the physical home, but our home is more than just the physical space. It's the energy and the emotional state that we're all in when we're here.
Right.
And so we clean the dust mites, but we're not cleaning the energetic, emotional dust mites.
Ooh.
And so like having conversations before they need to be had. So learning all of these tools are so important.
Yeah, man. I love this so much. You're making me think about two things actually. One is this thing happened the other day with Judd. And when you talked about like expressing things instead of bottling them down, here's a funny example. There was a piece of paper in our home that had the word fun house on it with a phone number written in a handwriting that neither one of us recognized, that fell out of a bag. And I don't know, like it was a backpack or something. So, okay. So I find this piece of paper and I'm like, why is there a piece of paper with a woman's handwriting that says fun
alert,
house,
survival pattern?
Totally. And that was like fully what I was experiencing. So I was like, okay, let's not go into a story about this. And I'm going to ask him about this, because I could have just like thrown it out and felt weird about it and suppressed it and probably had like dreams about him cheating on me and my, suppressed in my psyche. These are how that's why your dreams are happening and you're like having nightmares about these things, is because there's something there that wants to be expressed. So I was like, no, I'm not going to push that down. The funny thing is he had already seen the piece of paper because I think he was the one cleaning out the bag. And he put the piece of paper on the counter thinking like, I don't know, maybe I'll address this, but maybe this is a phone number she needs, but this is kind of weird. Why does it say Funhouse? So both of us were thinking the same thing. And I brought it up and I was like, do you know what this piece of paper is? Like, I'm feeling kind of insecure right now. And he was like, no, it's yours. Like, it's definitely came out of your bag. And like, I was feeling insecure as well. And I was like, babe, I really don't think it's mine. And he was like, I really don't think it's mine. And we were just like in this mystery of it. And later, I was like, I'm going to type this phone number into my phone and see if it's like programmed in or something. Because he was so convinced that it was mine. I typed the phone number in, and it is a friend of mine's name pops up, a female friend. And I realized that when I was over at their house doing a podcast interview, Judd was there chilling out and they gave him the Wi-Fi. And the Wi-Fi title was Funhouse, like that was their network. And the password was a phone number. So of like a person in that house. And so we just like laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed, but we were able to clear it instead of just both of us being like, this person is like doing a fun house sexy thing with whatever that even means.
Oh my gosh.
And then the second thing I want to bring, which is really cool for anyone listening, is a really honest conversation I had with Judd. I think I told you about this the other day. We like to take baths together and then sit and have really deep conversations in the bath. And when we first started dating, there was this conversation about, what are the reasons that you broke up with your past partners? And give me your honest perception of what happened. And it's interesting to watch how our partner weaves the narrative, like non-judgmentally, but you can pick out a lot from their story. And luckily, Judd and I have both done a great deal of work on this, where our stories were not projecting a lot of blame onto the other people that we broke up with. And I think if you're talking to somebody and they're saying a lot of horrible things about an ex, there's some unprocessed emotion there. And that is likely an area that they need to have a little bit of tenderness and attention to if they do not want that pattern to repeat with you. Everybody wants to believe they're special. We want to believe we're special. And oh, those other people were shit, but like we're the best because now we're the chosen one, right? And I think that's a very naive perspective. So to ask this question is incredibly brave, and to be like, what were the reasons that your previous relationships ended from your ex's perspective and from yours? Here's the follow-up question, which is even scarier to ask. Because when we first start dating people, there's always a couple of like things that maybe are like red flags where we're like, oh, that's an interesting pattern or behavior that they have. And then when there's a breakup, that ends up being the thing that we're like, I knew it. I knew it.
I knew it from the very start.
I knew it from the beginning. Well, if you knew it, why didn't you like work with it or say something? So these are the red flags. So the brave question is to be like, and this is what I turned to Judd and said, okay, what are the red flags you see in me that could potentially be the thing that ended our relationship? What do you think my Achilles heel is? And to be willing, ready, and able to have an honest dialogue, to be able to receive that without defensiveness because you care so deeply about the relationship working. And so we went there, we just like aired out all the dirty laundry, and he was commenting on how he's fearful because of his upbringing and watching how hard his parents worked, that he noticed that I have some patterns of overworking at times. And he could see how the overworking could erode his parents' relationship and intimacy. And he was fearful that my overworking tendencies would erode at our intimacy. And I said, thank you so much for bringing that. I'm going to be with that. I'm going to look at that. What can we actionably do to ensure that doesn't happen? When that starts happening, what is our plan of action for you to bring that to me gracefully? How do I desire to receive that feedback? And going there together.
Yes, this is so beautiful. Mm-hmm. What I hear in the last bit of what you just shared, first of all, just beautiful that you have deep conversations in the bathtub and that you're willing and able to ask those questions and maintain your center and have the capacity to hear the answers and to move forward with them together. What I heard in the last part was like, there was a noticing of this was present in my upbringing with my parents, and this is what I notice in you. And there's a little bit of something here. Something that I've been exploring lately is like how those moments are reenactments and opportunities for us to complete incomplete experiences from our past. And so it's like, from my outside perspective looking in, I'm like, wow, what a gift that Judd attracted you, and you had this little habit or pattern at some times that showed up as a memory, something that was similar to a little bit of the soft spot or hardship from his past, and how much that is an opportunity for him, not to run from, not to suppress, but to share directly with you, and then be something that you two are consciously working together to be able to like repattern something there.
I think you hit the nail on the head. And this is why relationships can be such a powerful container for healing. Fully understand and accept that your partner will trigger you, right? Like that's a non-negotiable. You're living or you're being together that often or in a tight space. Someone you love, you're afraid of losing that person you love. The closer you get, sometimes it gets scarier because you've got more, chips in the game. You will get triggered. That's a non-negotiable. But how the two of you dance within that, the space you hold for each other, that's the part that creates miracle healing experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you share that, what comes up for me is noticing when I'm really, I like to use the word activated. Sometimes I say triggered, but triggered feels like
totally
a little bit different of like an experience.
That feels like a gun too, which feels like violent.
It's like a lot.
Yeah.
I like to say activated. I'm like, when I share with Luke, like I'm activated in something right now, or like I've been activated all day, the ways that he shows up for me in that experience is so healing.
How does he show up for you in that experience?
There's been like a learning process throughout our relationship. And so we kind of like teach and train each other, and by saying like, this felt really good, or this didn't feel so good, or here's what I would love. And so now it's like this patience and presence. And sometimes he'll put his hand on my heart, look in my eyes, be like, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. And it's gotten to that beautiful point from more of a rocky beginning where like this a healthy relationship was definitely new for me. And I think to some capacity new for both of us, learning what each other like and feel safe with versus closing off and not being willing to be vulnerable. And so, yeah, it's like a really beautiful journey to go down together. And I think one thing I want to share with your listeners right now is that it all gets easier with practice.
Yeah.
And like the unraveling is beautiful. And that when I was first starting with feeling a certain emotion that I had previously deemed as the worst thing ever, something that was going to make me a bad person, or when I was first starting to get in touch with my needs or speaking that out loud to a partner and like actually feeling like I'm worthy of like even sharing this, let alone it being received or supported, like all of those things, terrifying. And like one little step at a time, it's gotten so much easier.
Beautiful. Thank you for that peace and for that encouragement. And on the note of Luke, I did a little sneaky thing while we were setting up, and I asked him a question about you.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And I said, okay, Luke, I'm about to interview your beloved Alyse, and you know more about her than arguably anybody on the planet. If you were me, what question would you ask her?
I can't believe this.
And his answer was so sweet.
Oh.
And it also relates to the night that I met you and one thing that we nerded out in the kitchen over. And his answer to me was, ask her about her love of conscious parenting and how on earth she got on that journey, given that she's not yet a parent, and her extreme passion and dedication for it. So I would love if we could answer Luke's question and segue into your conscious parenting excitement and journey.
Wow.
Yes. You're all misty-eyed. It's
I am.
Beautiful.
I'm like, oh, Luke said that? Yeah. So here's like where dots connect a lot, and it gets very interesting. So where to begin? Do you want the summary or do you want the real deal story?
The real deal. This is the thought room. We go deep.
Okay. So about 8 months ago, I was on my way to a party. It was like the last party before I moved to a new place. And the party was an outdoor experience and it was shut down when we got there. And so I was like, okay, this is a change of plans. And so it ended up being this really beautiful women's circle. We all went back home and we were all reflecting to each other what we see as each individual's gifts and what we have to offer in the world. And it was like one person would share at a time, and it came time for my friends to reflect to me. And it was just this organic unraveling of a completely different path for me to take in life. And it started off with me creating children's books featuring my dog, my golden doodle, Silo Nelson. And they were like, Alyse, like, you have like a way with sharing everything in such simple terms. Like, I have had like 10-year-olds tuning into my YouTube videos for years, and they're like, you've helped me learn how to love myself and be more confident and believe in myself. And I do have a way with simplifying. And I also, remember my mom sharing when I was younger, like, you've always had a way of connecting with children. And so my friends are sharing, like, you creating a children's book featuring Silo as the main character, and it's called Silo's Adventures, and he is helping children relate to their emotions in a healthy way. And so I'm listening to this and I'm like participating a little bit, but mostly like hearing this circle, like back-to-back reflections that's just unraveling this new mission, which feels so connected, so aligned. And I'm like exploding in awe. And then I start adding to it. And I'm like, yes. And it's a series. And it's like Silo's Adventures with Anger, Silo's Adventures with Anxiety, Silo's Adventures with Shame. And then at the end of the book, there has to be a point where it's like, hey, parent who's reading this book to your child, do you want to learn more about how you can support your child with relating to their emotions in a healthy way? And then some sort of a informational part of it starts with you. It's your behavior that you're modeling, that they're learning from. It's not just what you're teaching them or reading to them. They're learning from you. And this is something that I had previously learned from my own healing retreat, that we learn what's modeled through their behavior and what's felt through their energy. And I'm like, this is it. Yes, this is important. And then if they want to learn more, then there is a podcast, there's a network, there's an opportunity for them to dive deep and learn from different experts and learn all of these different modalities, the spectrum of methods and approaches for parenting. And then also reparenting ourselves. And this is for aspiring parents. This is for parents with young children in the early developmental years. And this is for our generation. This is for my generation. This is for me. This is what I want to learn before I bring children into this world. And this is what, like, my friend at the time had just found out she was pregnant, my closest friend. And I'm like, this is for her. Like, this is for all of us. And this is how we are going to create a new generation where kids are attuned to, because their parents have learned how to attune to themselves. And so I could just go on and on and on, like, this is it. And what it feels like most is that the past 6 years of my life and my livelihood and my career were really formed from my personality. It was like the Alyse Parker show. It was my journey. It was me documenting everything. It was me, which was beautiful. And I know that it's led me to where I am today, to have 600,000 mostly young women tuning into what I share as I now step into what feels very much like my soul purpose. And so, yes, I'm 27, I don't have children, and yet there is no denying that, like, this is the role I'm meant to play. And I'm here to be the interviewer. I'm here to be the curious person and learn and learn and learn and provide the umbrella of information on parenting for others to use their discernment on what works best for them.
You are the perfect person for this job. And I am in awe of you. And I'm getting emotional. This is a big vision. And thank you. Thank you for bringing this. I'm excited. I want to help in any way that I can. And, I know you said you're going to start a podcast. So obviously we're going to let everybody know when that comes out. And you're going to do an app. You're going to have the support network. And yeah, This is powerful stuff. I love what you said about like, hey parents, it starts with you encouraging everybody, whether they have kids, plan to have kids, don't want to have kids, but you're probably going to interact with kids, or you're just going to interact with adults who are also going to interact with their kids. Like we're all connected.
Yeah.
This is so powerful. This idea of healing ourselves so that the next generation can be more healed.
Yeah.
And our responsibility is to go inward and look inward. If that's the only thing that we do in our whole lives and we never hit another substantial metric or whatever that means, this is the most powerful work I believe that any individual can do, is to be brave enough to know yourself, to go into the deep, dark caves that you don't want to go into, of those pockets inside of yourself, and be willing to come back with an armful of gold. So thank you. Thank you so much. I am so very excited for you. Again, when I say you're the perfect person for this, it's like everything that you've told today about your story and the way that life has trained you to be the perfect interviewer for this, to be curious enough, to be playful enough, to be bold enough as a person who doesn't have kids, to be like, I'm going to start a conscious parenting thing. Like, you're the perfect person because you have no biases at this point. You're just wanting to learn. And I think that is so absolutely gorgeous. You talked about reparenting for just a second, that being a part of the overall mission for adults even to reparent themselves. Can you talk about what that means?
Yes. So reparenting, learning to be gentle with ourselves, learning that when there is anxiety that arises or anger that arises, that's not who we are. That is a part that exists within us in that moment or from a past period of time. And there's a reenactment that's bringing that to the surface to be felt, not from a place of judgment, from a place of compassion and presence and acceptance. And from my current understanding, and I imagine this is going to evolve a lot as I start learning from more experts in this realm, is that it's about learning how to attune to ourselves and how to build this capacity to be present with what is and accept. No more making things wrong.
Right.
When we make feeling angry wrong in ourselves, of course we're going to do that with a child in front of us or our partner or other people. And so it's building this loving relationship with ourselves where we're here to be gentle and slow down and listen to what the body needs. Instead of just tuning into a parenting model, but disregarding our own self.
Can you think of a time recently where you had an emotional moment and walk us through the way in which you were sort of able to reparent that emotion? What does the inner process look like when a thing comes up, if you can recall anything that's happened recently, and really, take us into the detail of how someone might do that themselves?
There was something that came up for me recently in relationship, which I've shared before is often my greatest teacher. And there was an activation, what I call. And I noticed there was a part within me that felt rage, anger. And there was a part simultaneously that felt such sadness. And there was also the stories present. And so this is where we expand outward beyond being completely in the story, in the thought of what's happening or what could happen or blah, blah, blah. And we expand beyond being completely in the anger or the sadness. And we, over time, can cultivate this capacity to hold that present experience as a witness. And I like to visualize or feel it as this nurturing energy around me, almost like I'm surrounded in an egg. That's like this mothering, nurturing, caring, like, okay, I see that there's this feeling. I see that there's this thought, and we're not identified with it right now. I notice that it's there and it's okay. It doesn't need to go away. I don't need to make that thought wrong. I don't need to make that emotion wrong, but I'm going to just be here with this. And so normally there will be breathing, slowing my breath down, breathing deeper, maybe putting my hand on a specific part of my body. If I notice the sadness is kind of like, oh, this feeling in my stomach, I'll put my hand there and be like, I'm here. You're okay. You're safe. And if I feel the anger, I often feel like constriction in my chest. I'll put my hand there.
Yeah.
And just really be with it. And then if the thoughts come back, I'm like, okay, I'm noticing this story, it's looping, and this is a story. And so I've also learned a lot with nonviolent communication. Okay, this is a story. This isn't an observation of something that actually happened.
Right.
An observation is like the factual, this is what happened, and the story is the embellishment of it all.
Right. Or a projection into the future, which is another common one.
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm afraid this is going to happen, I don't want this to happen.
Right.
And so I notice, okay, yep, that's a story. And it's this beautiful dance of, yes, sometimes the stories really pull me in. And then it's a practice of expanding my awareness beyond that and holding it all in the present moment and being able to breathe through the emotions. And sometimes it gets to a point of like complete, like metabolizing and resolve or resolution in the emotional, like physical experience. And sometimes there's progress.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at in my journey.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I think one of the key things about what you just said was this phrase of the present moment, because I think that's where all of our power resides, in the present moment. And when we are tumbling into the future, just on a hamster wheel of these looping stories of the fear of what could potentially happen out of infinite possibilities, that's not progressive. And in like kind, turning our heads around and looking deeply into the past at all the horrible things that have happened that have entrained us with more fear and how that's probably going to happen again is also not helpful. And when people talk about embodiment, I feel in our community, sometimes it's just thrown around in a very untethered way. And I don't know if everyone knows what that means. Like, what does embodiment mean? And I love your description of what that means to you and getting into the present moment and allowing the feelings to sort of pass through you like a sieve, or like water pouring over top of you, where you're just observing. You're like, oh, I'm under a waterfall of anger. I'm just under this waterfall. That's okay. I'm just going to sit under this waterfall. You are not the waterfall of anger, but there is a waterfall of anger. So let's not deny that there's a waterfall of anger, but let's not also become the waterfall of anger, right? It's just there. It's happening. It's in the present moment. We're going to be there. We're going to feel the breath. We're going to feel the body and remind ourselves we're safe.
Yes. Yes, that is it.
Yeah, girl.
Yeah. And bringing in this like gentle, loving curiosity versus like this like mind dominant, like fixated on like fixing it, making it better, making the anger go away, making the quote unquote negative thoughts go away. It's like, whoa, that's a lot. That's a lot. And let's bring more gentleness in.
Yeah.
And lightness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting bringing it back to the majors that I studied in school.
Yeah.
Communication, art, and secondary education.
Yeah.
And here we are talking about conscious parenting and children's books and conscious communication. And this is what I mean by notice the blessings, notice how all the dots connect. And then I also look back on my first experience sitting in ceremony and remembering childhood trauma, and then a year, 2 years later, here we are. And it all is for us.
Right.
It's not to us, it's all for us. It all makes sense. And we don't need to know in the moment. We just need to trust.
That's a serious mic drop moment. I mean, you nailed it. And when you started listing your majors, you had me going back into mine to reflect on how, when I first went to college, I was studying journalism because I wanted to be like a TV show host or a news anchor woman. And in high school, I did a co-op opportunity internship at the local TV station. But when I got to college, I didn't like journalism. It wasn't my kind of writing. I didn't want to write news headlines and it didn't light me up. So I switched to psychology. And in a way, I kind of felt like that was a failure, like my writing career. Oh, I guess I don't like that as much as I thought. I don't want to do the news anchor woman thing. And then I switched to psychology and I did a degree in psychology. And then I didn't go into that as a vocation because I didn't want to be a therapist. That didn't resonate with me. And so I tabled that and became a teacher. And then I only taught for 2 years, 3 years, and then I stopped teaching. And somebody could say, oh, look, she had no idea what she wanted to do. Those were all little failures. And my mind could have gone there if I wanted to. But instead, I just relaxed and just kept trusting what felt right in my body. I followed my curiosity. I followed my excitement. And now I'm here doing this, doing the interviews, doing the coaching, which is this beautiful psychology overlap and the teaching piece. And it all came back around. Yeah. So what you said about we don't have to, life is not happening to us. It's for us. I think that's it. It's throw your hands up and enjoy the roller coaster ride, man.
Yeah. Yes. Throw your hands up, enjoy the ride. It's all coming together. Everything is happening in our highest good. Put that on repeat.
Yes.
That will change your life.
Yes.
And it's interesting to see how all those different majors completely come into play in the work that you're doing now.
Yeah. Same for you.
Mm-hmm.
Alyse, I want to ask you as we come to a close with this interview, if there's anything else tugging on your heart, wanting to come through right now, wanting to be shared. And secondarily, after that, where can people find you, where they can connect with you and where they can support you and follow along on this amazing conscious parenting journey and all of your other exciting things you have going on?
That's a big question.
Yeah, it's actually several questions. Sorry about that.
As far as anything else to add, I mean, first off, this has been a beautiful conversation with you. And I'm so grateful for all those tuning in right now. I would love to add, as we're sharing this space right now, speaking, I have yet to announce publicly what I'm moving into in the world of conscious parenting to my community.
Sweet.
And I believe that by the time this comes out, I will have just announced. And so to anyone listening who is a parent, an aspiring parent, or somebody who plans to have children and you are looking to contribute to a new generation of souls who believe in themselves and don't need to struggle with anxiety and depression and suicidal thoughts, but they really love themselves and believe in themselves and have a healthy relationship with emotions. And if you can get on board with the vision of that and that the power really is in our hands right now to learn how to relate to ourselves and attune to ourselves so that we can be prepared for the souls coming to this planet. If you are on board with that, once my podcast is out, I would love to have you tune in.
Do you have a name for that yet?
I believe it's going to be called Straight Up Conscious Parenting.
Cool.
Yeah, that's what's coming through right now.
Great. That makes it easy.
Yeah. And as far as where to find me, at Alyse Parker, Alyse, on all social platforms. And yeah, I'll probably share a link for some sort of opt-in to stay in touch with conscious parenting information as well. I think that's it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I am leaving this conversation buzzing, feeling so inspired and so lifted and intoxicated by your energy. You are a powerful human being. You're exactly the type of person that I want leading the next generation of children and nurturing their little minds and bodies and spirits. And I am so honored for our blossoming friendship. I bless the divine whatever brought us together that night. And thank you for trusting your heart in opening it up to me. And I cannot wait to see how our journeys together go.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. And I love that our paths crossed in the way they did. And I'm so excited for all that unravels. And interestingly enough, oftentimes, I mean, it's been, I think, over 2 hours now.
Yeah.
Oftentimes when I am, quote unquote, on speaking, conversing for this long, there is a little bit of like, getting tired. I feel lit up right now.
Same.
And that goes to show that your energy is on fire right now. And I appreciate you. It's a blessing to have you here. I hope this has been an amazing episode for your listeners.
This has been one of my favorite conversations. Very, very effortless and easy. And I hope everybody listening, lets us know what they loved about it. And again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your journey. Thank you for your wisdom. And I look forward to more.
Thank you.